It's fine. It's fine.
Well, good, happy Friday. Welcome to the And Now What community, where we embrace and celebrate our season change. If you've ever experienced a moment where you couldn't go back and you knew if you went forward that it would be a little scary, then you are in the right place. We navigate our season change here with the 5 P's: person, place, pastime, project, and physical activity. And today I could not be happier to welcome Shasta Nelson, author and friendship expert, to our little Facebook Live. If you are here, please leave us a comment because we need to know you're here, and I'll tell you why. At the end of this broadcast, or actually tomorrow morning, I will be giving away a pre-ordered copy of Shasta's new book. So welcome, Shasta.
Thank you. It's such a joy to be with you.
It is awesome to have you here. If you don't mind, I want to kind of structure this so that we talk a little bit about you, a little bit about friendship in general, and then we'll introduce your book, baby, okay?
We can go anywhere you want, Chris. I am just here in your hands, so you can go wherever you want. I love it.
Okay. So first, let me ask you what I ask every person that I interview, and that is, what's your why? Why friendship?
There's so many ways I could answer that. I feel like I should have one sentence, but it's, part of it is I can look back from my earliest childhood and just see how much I valued connection. And I went in, I was actually a pastor, was my first career. And I can look back on that and see that what really drew me into that was the idea of community. Like that was where community was modeled to me growing up. And that's where people came together and supported each other. And if I had a criticism of it, it was often that everyone felt like they had to be perfect or have an image that we couldn't really be or be really accepted. And so I've always been kind of hungry for like, what does it look like if we just love each other and can show up and be seen and it feels good and we can be in each other's lives. And I think that kind of coupled with like seeing the need, to be quite honest, as I was just growing up and doing psychology and studying all these different things and pastoring and coaching, I just kind of kept seeing this repetitious answer to people saying they just don't feel that connected. And I started looking at the loneliness numbers and I saw how we were all gravitating, like obsessed with like romantic relationships and parent-child relationships. And I kept saying, those are just a few of the relationships. And what about all these other relationships? So I was probably kind of just seeing this blatant need, my own passion, kind of connecting. And I really, really think the world would be better if we all showed up feeling supported and feeling connected in more meaningful ways. And that just drives me. And I believe that's the answer to our spiritual growth, our physical health. Like, you got me on my soapbox. I'm like, this matters more than anything.
I love your soapbox. So in earlier books, you mentioned that you were once a pastor. You just mentioned it again.
Yeah.
And because I serve a largely Christian audience, do you want to tell us about what you did as a pastor? What was that period of your life like?
Yeah, and it's so cool because when I actually decided to start focusing more on relationships and I started a company that was more for community building and kind of a match.com for female friends, quite honestly, back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like I was leaving ministry to do this thing that I felt really passionate about and really called to. And yet it was probably 6 months later where I just felt like all of a sudden I was like, I'm doing the exact same thing I used to do as a pastor. I'm just doing it in a different context. Like I'm still about personal growth. I'm still about relational connection. And I still believe that our biggest spiritual growth comes from how we interact with each other. Like love is the answer. I mean, that is what we would say defines the best of spiritual practices. And so to me, it's interesting. I still sometimes feel like an undercover pastor. And I don't mean that with any agenda or any desire for somebody to believe a certain thing. I mean it as I really believe that we function our best and our highest when we know how to love each other. And that is one of the number one commandments in the Bible. More often than pray, more often than believe, more often than like all these other things that are important spiritual practices, loving one another is what it comes down to. And so, yeah, pastoring was really special in a lot of ways. It's where I did marriage counseling with people, which gave me a lot of awareness. It's where I sat by deathbeds with people. It's where I trained small group leaders on how do you bond strangers together? How do we make a difference in our community? So a lot of those things that I kind of were like my training ground for like, what is community and how do we build that bond? It felt so opposite, but I look back and I'm just like, it was a perfect path for me.
That is awesome. Um, because we can't have a talk about friendship without looking at the opposite, the loneliness, could you tell us some of the health benefits of friendship?
Yes, yes. And let me just start by defining loneliness a little bit because loneliness has gotten a bad reputation. We often think of it as this person who's a recluse, who has no friends, who has no social skills. And so it's hard for some of us to identify with it. We think, I'm not lonely. In fact, I'm peopled out. I have so many people. I have friends. I could call so and so. And we often don't identify with it. Loneliness is an emotion that your body is telling you that you need more connection. And it's right up there with like hunger and thirst. It works the same way in our body. And so it tells us on a regular basis, I have a desire to have more interaction. So loneliness in and of itself is not bad. What's bad, similar to hunger is not bad. What's bad about hunger is if you don't have access to food, or you don't eat good food, or you choose not to eat, or you have a bad relationship with eating, like that's where hunger can become
Mm-hmm.
problematic. But hunger in and of itself is great. Loneliness is good. It tells us that we have more capacity for love. It's when we don't acknowledge it, or we ignore it, or we have shame around it, that we then don't know how to step into it. And when we are chronically lonely and continue to ignore it, that's where the health benefits are. The damage is done so big. Yes, it's as equivalent to it does the equivalent damage in our body as if we smoke 15 cigarettes a day. It's way worse than being obese, having a bad diet, or not exercising. And it does the lifelong damage of being a lifelong alcoholic. So it's got really, when I was doing all the research again for the newest book, I was just reminded again, like this is the health factor. And I might put sleep up as higher, but it's like the next most important health factor for our health. And that is feeling connected puts our body into support mode, which takes it out of stress mode. And so it actually protects our body from absorbing the impact of stress and crisis in our life if we feel loved and supported. So we've got medical doctors going on record saying how you answer the question, how loved and supported do you feel, tells us more about your health and your likelihood of dying 20 years out than any other question we can ask you.
Wow, that is really, really profound.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It matters. It matters. We sometimes talk about friendship like it's this foo-foo thing, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
let's just go have girls' night and pull out our pom-poms. And I'm like, this is the most substantive health issue of our time. This is a public health issue, and it really, really matters for all gender, like for everybody. And it's often treated like
Mm-hmm.
a women's issue. This is a human need.
Yeah. And as we get further and further into being an on-screen all the time culture, friendship is harder and harder. And for me, I know my husband and I have to call each other on it sometimes because sometimes we want so much to be connected in the world through this screen that we forget that we actually have each other right there in the same room. So, darn.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
my next question is I'm watching to see Karen White is with us. Is that someone that's in your friend group?
Ooh, I don't know.
Okay. We,
Hi,
I,
Karen.
okay, I want to say hello to a
You
couple
can't
of
test me
people.
on all of my followers' names. I won't know those.
Okay, so April Chapman is here. Hi, April. I want to say hello, and I'm sorry for anybody who catches this on the video because it's really important because we're talking about friendship to make sure that the people who are here feel seen and heard in a safe and positive way, which is one of Shasta's hallmark benchmark. If you know anything about Shasta's material, that is like the thing. So I want to say hello to April, to Karen, Sarah Maria. I'm glad you're here. She comes a lot on Fridays. Leslie, I haven't seen you in forever, but I'm glad you're here. Lala, I'm so glad you're here. I'm sorry you're having tech problems. Let's see, and April says hi to everyone. So you guys feel free to talk amongst yourself and remember to put comments in there because every comment gives you a chance at winning one of these books. So, okay, so my next question, Shasta, is
Yeah.
about our friendship triangle. And I'm going to put it up on my side of the screen. And in the friendship triangle, I want you to talk about how it works against loneliness.
Yeah, so let's start with what you just reiterated is the definition of friendship. It's any relationship where both people feel seen in a safe and satisfying way. And so we're going for three things. We need to be seen, it needs to feel good and reliable and trustworthy, and it needs to leave us feeling better for having been with each other. And so those build the triangle, the three requirements of all healthy relationships. At the bottom of the triangle is positivity. That's what leaves us feeling satisfied and good. This is us enjoying each other. This is us laughing, feeling accepted. This is the hugs. This is the inside jokes, the empathy, the validation, the gratitude, the celebration. This is us leaving each other feeling better for having been with each other. So not feeling judged, not feeling neglected, not feeling criticized or unseen, or just kind of not loved. So that's obvious to all of us. We want more of that. And then the two arms up the triangle are consistency and vulnerability. And consistency is what leaves us feeling safe. That's what leaves us feeling like we can trust that person, because consistency is consistent shared interactions and experiences. This is our history that we build. It's the time logged. It's the pattern that our friendship develops. It's how often we see each other and what we do together and how we stay in touch with each other. And so that is where we kind of create a reliable sense of like knowing how the other person's going to respond. And the more history we build, the more we feel like we have a future with each other. And so this is kind of like our timeline as a friendship. And then the third requirement is vulnerability. And I teach that as we increase our consistency, so as our commitment to each other goes up, as our safety goes up, as we feel like we spend more time with each other, so should our vulnerability. And our vulnerability is where we feel seen. This is where we share ourselves, where we have self-disclosure and reveal. And this can be our ideas. It can be for women, especially. This is a really good practice of vulnerability, is sharing what we're proud of. So we're not just talking about sharing insecurities and shame and hard things. While that's a part of it, and if you go higher up the triangle, that becomes more appropriate. But that's just being willing to share, put out an idea, or to say, I don't know, or to be curious, or to kind of take a little bit of a risk and to lean into that relationship. And then it needs to feel good. So it goes back to the bottom of the triangle, and we need to feel like when we shared something that the other person goes, oh, that's so, like, is interested and is curious and is empathetic, or whatever the appropriate response is. And then we want to do it again, which is consistency. And then we share a little bit more, which is vulnerability. And then it feels good. And the more we do these three things, the more we move up the triangle with a few people. And our bond with each other can be evaluated based on how much we practice these three things. And so every relationship starts at the bottom of the triangle, and some of them will work up toward the top of the triangle. And the top of the triangle is our closest of close friends, tried and true, highest level of consistency, highest level of vulnerability, highest level of expressed positivity. And most of our relationships will be in the bottom third, bottom half. But it's really important that when we're talking about loneliness, many of us, it's not that we're lonely for more interaction. Many of us have a full bottom part of our triangle. Many of us, when we're lonely, it's for more intimacy. It's for deeper relationships. It's for more relationships at the top of the triangle, where we truly feel seen, unfiltered, where we feel like we can just be with people and it feels safe because we have this reliable familiarity with each other, and we feel loved by them. And we know that even if we say something wrong, that they'll assume the best and that we can work it through. And so those are the relationships at the top of the triangle that become like our best friends. But we need all of the relationships. They're all incredibly valuable. We'll talk about my new book in a second, but yeah, in workplace, we need these same three things present in the workplace. And, even people we don't necessarily even like that we have to work with are still going to be at the bottom of our triangle. And then it's just making sure that we have healthy expectations of each relationship. And I think, not to go off on a tangent here, but one of the most common, I would say, if I had to kind of assess like the most frustrations that I hear from people in friendship when they're writing me and asking me for their advice and stuff like that, it's often that they wanted a friend who was probably at the middle of the triangle to act like somebody at the top of the triangle. And so often we'll look around and say, well, that's the person I'm closest to. And we might not realize that we haven't actually developed the top of our triangle. And it could just be that this person is somebody that, has practiced a fair level of consistency and a fair level of vulnerability. But it's honestly, if we were to be completely transparent, it would be probably in the middle of our triangle. But then we get our feelings hurt that person's not acting like the way we wanted them to act. So it's not just identifying where somebody's at on the triangle. It's then matching our expectations of that relationship to the right spot too, which is really important because that's where so much disappointment and hurt takes place.
Actually, there is one question that I got through actually direct email, who who saw this, and she and I have had some interaction on girlfriend circles before, and she got into a relationship where they went to the top of the triangle, super vulnerable before they had any established foundation.
Mm.
And the friend has just experienced the loss of her husband. She's now a widow, and she's pushing this gal away. And yet she calls her best friend. So there's two messages going on here. And she's not quite sure which message to listen to. I just feel like at this point she needs to go back down to the bottom of the triangle and work her way up with some consistency. Can you tell her how to do that? Consistency and shared vulnerability. Gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, one of the things that's important is to then, like, those are moments that really hurt us, obviously, and we kind of want to grieve that and say, this didn't live up to my expectations. And then I would usually, yeah, what you just did was so perfect. It's like, which of these three requirements is in lack? Like, which one kind of is feeling broken right now? And any relationship, I can guarantee anybody that any relationship that's not feeling good is because at least one of those three things is in lack. And so, for you to identify and say, this is probably, did you say that you felt like the consistency was needed to be increased?
Well, it sounds to me like what's going on is they're trying to operate at this, high level when they don't have the consistency. So it's a lot of vulnerability without much positivity or commitment.
Yeah. 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 I would say it might even be the positivity one. Often when we're in crisis, I wrote in my first book a couple pages on how do you practice positivity in crisis because, we go through loss and it's not like we're going to show up and be like, oh, this is great. And she's obviously in a horrible loss, but we still have the responsibility to practice positivity, and positivity can be saying thank you for going through this time with me. That's an act of positivity to express appreciation. Tell me a little bit about what's going on with you. I know that right now what's going on with me is really big, but I care about your life too. Tell me about that. And you can talk about your husband. Like, it's okay. And giving permission to somebody to still be happy and to have a life and to be curious about them. And so we can still show up with positivity. And that's a really important thing for us to realize. Research shows us that we have to have 5 positive feelings for every negative feeling. And that's really important for us to, all of us, recognize, because we can say, I want to be there for you. But unconsciously, if every time I interact with you, I feel heavy, I feel sad, I feel like whatever I name that.
Disappointed.
I'm unconsciously not going to want to increase my consistency with you. And so sometimes we'll sit there and say this consistency is broken, but really it's the positivity that's broken. Because if I felt really empathetic, if I felt seen and connected and accepted every time I was with you, then I would want that more often. And so for many of us, it's really stepping back and to say, what can I still do for this friendship? I went through a divorce and I was not like the most happy person, understandably, but I was still like, what can I still do for my friends that are going through this with me? Like, I had a friendship dinner one night, a gratitude dinner, where I invited, the 5 or 6 girlfriends who had kind of gone through this with me. And I wrote them each a thank you card, and I cooked them dinner. And I just wanted I wanted to express my love to them and do something that just says, thank you. I know this is like, I'm taking withdrawals out of the bank we've developed, and I want to acknowledge that. And I love you. And so it's learning how to still be appreciative and still show up in that, which is hard. And both people need to do that. And and hopefully, I guess that's like the bank account idea, where it's like, hopefully we're making enough deposits along the way that when we need to make those withdrawals that we can, because we do need to be vulnerable, but it's also, we still need to keep expressing that appreciation and just have healthy expectations. That's a very hard situation.
Leslie just asked, because we just gave examples of some positivity, could you give examples of consistency?
Yes. So consistency can be frequency. It can be, and when relationships are getting started, that's often what it needs to be. So when you think about who you've become good friends with over the years, it usually, when you look at the top 4 reasons where we're making our friends, it's childhood, it's high school, it's college, and it's work. And those are the places that were already consistent for us. And so the best thing you can do is you basically have 2 options when it comes to consistency. It's join or attend something consistently. Show up every Friday morning to Chris's, start seeing the same people and connecting. Yep. Or go to the same religious organization, or go to the same networking association. Be in that Facebook group, like whatever it is that you showing up to consistently, participating at work and whatever is already the kids' school. Or your only other choice, and this is hard for us to swallow, your only other choice is to create the consistency yourself, which means inviting and initiating and scheduling and inviting and initiating and scheduling and doing that
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over. And the research is showing, one study showed that that it takes us about 50 hours before we feel like we go from stranger to friend. And it takes us 200 hours before we actually feel best friends with somebody. So I don't, I think it depends on what we're doing during that time, and all of our personalities are different. But it's a really important message to remind ourselves that that triangle, it takes 200 hours to get to the top of that triangle. And so that says several things to me. One, it says if you've already invested those 200 hours with somebody, you're better off trying to repair it and protect it, that investment, than you are just starting all over. It
Mm-hmm.
also says to us that we need to have have unhealthy expectations, that you're not going to feel that close to somebody if you just get together for lunch once every couple months with them. You're putting
Yeah.
in like 3 or 4 hours a year, and it's going to take a very long time before you feel that closeness. So it really does remind us that the more momentum we can give to a relationship, the more time. Basically, it's like the way we date, right? When we are interested in somebody, we're just like all in. We're not
Yeah.
like, oh, that was so fun, we'll do that again in a couple months. Like, we
Yeah.
just make time. But with friendship, somehow we just act like it would be too eager, and so a lot of friendships just never get that consistency. So frequency is a part of it, but yeah, just really trying to spend that time together is really, really important.
And I think it bears mentioning that when we spend time with our girlfriends, we have a better chance of a longer lifespan with that friendship than we do with our own mates, because women consistently and statistically live longer than men.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
honor
Yeah, and I
and
think
cherish your girlfriends.
yeah, and I think that's also a call to the men in our lives. That that's one of the reasons why I think they die younger. Is the only place we've told them it's okay to be vulnerable and practice the high levels of the triangle are with women
Uh-huh.
and with romantic interests. And so we have a whole bunch of men out there who are lonely
It's
because we have
true.
not given them permission, told them it's normal, expected. We've treated friendship like close friendship. We basically have modeled the men two sides of the triangle. We've taught them to be friends with consistency and positivity, which is go have a good time together and then get together frequently and go do activities together. And we have not encouraged them to do the vulnerability piece except with women. And so it's putting an undue amount of pressure on women to be the emotional, like, receptacles to all the men in the world, but it's also hurting the men to not be able to have these close, intimate relationships with other men. And so when death and divorce happens in their lives, it makes sense that they go and remarry faster than women do,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the only place they're allowed to kind of show up. And so we really do need to change that
Wow.
model and say this is a men's issue in big, big ways.
That reshapes a lot of things the in the divorce rate, in unfaithfulness, all of that. Oh my gosh. Light bulbs. Okay.
This is kind of, and Chris, this is kind of why I wrote my new book. In a secret, and one of my motivations was publishers kept saying men aren't going to read a book on relationships, and I was like, they need to. And so they're like, they're not going to go buy the book on friendship. And I was like, well, they said they only buy books in the business section. I was like, well, then let's put a book in the business section on friendship, right? Like, this
Yes.
is one of the things that all of us women need to be saying to our men. This matters. This is for your health and happiness, and
Yes.
this is worth it.
Yeah. Um, uh, you write in your work about the people in the top of your triangle, and it is so inspirational. So tell me how they got there and how many of them are up there. I mean, you guys
Mm.
travel together every year, and um, just tell us a little bit about the top of your triangle.
Yeah, so I probably have a few more people at the top of my triangle than the average person. So this isn't necessarily to say that and loneliness is subjective. It all means what we each need and what we want. So there's no magic number that anyone needs to dangle up there. I have a group of girlfriends that you're speaking of, and they're all going to be on my Facebook Live on Monday. I'm having a big launch party, and they're going to be playing a big game with me at the end there. So you'll see there's a group
Ooh.
of five of us. And yeah, we've been getting together for 20 years going, and we all live in different parts of the country. So this is a group of us that gets together every year. And one of the really cool things that's happened with the pandemic is that when we all went into quarantine, we decided to get on Zoom together, the five of us. And we had such a good time just kind of debriefing and checking in on each other. And then we were like, let's do this again next week. And then let's do that again next week. And so now we've been doing weekly Zooms for an hour and a half every Sunday for 6 months now, 5 months. And I thought we were already like at the tip top of the triangle. And yet it's amazing how just adding that frequency in allows us to be sharing things with each other that's in real time and has increased. And it's not that I wasn't completely vulnerable with them beforehand. These are just all things that if we got together at our next girls trip, I would be telling them everything. But now we're going through it in real time with each other. We're updating and going through it where it's not just like something that happened to me last year. It's like something happening to me that right now that we can share with each other. And it has been so, so special. It's been a really good reminder of just how you can have so much consistency with friends. These are friends that I could have just gone deep with instantly at any time, but to be able to have that consistency on there again is so beautiful. So they're definitely there. And then I have like maybe 3 or 4 other women that are more kind of one friendships that I've made over the years that I would put up there as well, that are just super super dear friends of mine. And yeah, it's been a real I probably care more and more about it as the years go by. Like every time I read the research and write a book, I'm just like reminded again how important this is. And it's one of the highest values of my life is that yeah, my friendships, they've always meant a lot to me, but I cherish them. And even when I'm really busy with book launches, that's just one of the priorities that I don't ever let take a back burner.
That's awesome. There are a group of people on this live who are self-described as highly sensitive people. I am one of them. And they feel things on a much deeper level. One of them sent me this question, and it is, what do you advise someone who overwhelms easily, who has great intentions of being consistent but isn't, who may end up doing grand gestures for their friends because they feel bad about not being consistent? How do they build consistency instead of operating in this manner?
I think that's a question we should both answer because you are as much an expert on friendship as I am, and you've got the experience with HSP. But yeah, it's a really beautiful awareness that somebody can even identify that and articulate that. And I would just say, like, all the studies show that a bond happens incrementally in an escalating way. And we can put strangers in a room, and if we do this in just incremental ways, the bond happens. And so we don't want to just go and just dump a whole bunch on. I think a lot of women, we make the mistake of just thinking that vulnerability is the way to bond. And we just think we just go too vulnerable too fast. Right. And so it's probably, I mean, I love grand gestures, and I don't know what she's referring to with a grand gesture. So there's nothing against grand gestures, but it is a reminder that just small, it doesn't have to be big, like checking in on a text and just saying, I walked by the store and this purse made me think of you, or I'm eating gelato and it reminded me of like the time we did this together, or like just those little moments of like that little kind of, just all it takes is a little interaction, and our brain says, I have a bridge to that person, and I feel connected, I feel supported right now, like I could reach out if I needed to. And that's what leaves us feeling supported. I saw one study that said, it's interesting, we feel closer to the people that we could go have Sunday morning brunch with. Like we live close enough to them and we could meet them. Even if we actually never meet them for brunch, we feel closer to them just believing we could meet them for lunch, for brunch.
Wow.
And I think it's a really interesting thing it's just, we want to know somebody's there, and that's what leaves us feeling connected. Even if we don't need it or call it or whatever, it's that feeling that we could. So the little things matter a lot. And I would almost think that for somebody who overwhelms easily and feels great things, that would be a good big comfort to know that it just can, little tiny things can make a really really big difference. But what would you say, what would be your wisdom in that situation?
Well, because I know this person, I'm going to put our triangle back up. Um, my guess is that she thinks the relationship is at the top of the triangle, and because they're not getting together frequently, she feels like she needs to overemphasize how important they are, when in reality they aren't. They're in the center of the triangle, and it's not that they're not important, it's that they are, the consistency and the vulnerability isn't equal, or it hasn't reached the level that she thinks it has. Or maybe it's that the vulnerability and positivity and consistency hasn't reached the level that she thinks it should have, or the level that she thinks that person expects of them. And I will
Yeah.
tell you that this friend has also done a grand gesture with me, and it was totally unexpected. I would never dream from this person that I'm in the tip of her triangle or that she would want to put me there. I would love to be there. And I just know that she's got a lot of friends and she's really busy. And when I need her, I know I can Vox her on my phone and get immediate access. But I would never take up a lot of her time. Never. Because she's called in a different way, and that's important for her. But like, she's there for me when I need her.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's good.
but
That's
thank
good
you for letting
clarity. And
me
it
do that.
reminds, oh no, that was so wise. And I think that you raised such a good point, and that is that we don't put somebody on a triangle based on how much we love them or admire them. We can't just say, "Oh, I love Chris," and I just like and just put her at the top of my triangle because I love you so much, right? It's based on how much we practice these three things, and so that's really important that we can't just go and pinky promise ourselves best friends. We can't just go and do a grand gesture and be like, "We're now best friends." We can't just like tell them our whole life story and we're now best friends. Like we can't just accelerate that process with one or two or three big things. It really is the consistent practicing of these three things. And that's really important to know because I can find somebody and we could both say we love each other. We're going to be best friends. And it still takes time for the two of us to figure out who we still have to tell our stories. We still have to figure out how we both react, what jokes we laugh at, how often we call each other, what we do when we get together. Like it just takes time to build that pattern, that consistency. And that's really important to realize that friendship just has to, it just, it just has to be a reflection of these three things.
Well, and there's an evolution with it. The 50 hours from stranger to friend, the 200 hours to best friend. Those are really good, you know, benchmarks. Fluid,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. And it reminds us at least that this has to be developed, like
mhm,
I care less about the exact numbers, but it reminds us that this isn't something we so often just want to find our best friend. We think
mhm,
that we just are looking for somebody who we will both be friends and we will like each other. And we
mhm,
think we're looking for somebody who has a lot in common with us. Like that's what
mhm,
we walk around thinking.
mhm,
And that when I find you, we'll just be best friends.
mhm.
And we don't find a best friend, we foster a best friendship. We're not out there just discovering somebody. It's not about finding this needle in the haystack. It's not about finding the best friend. It's about creating the best friendship we can with people. And we all have examples of people that we've bonded with that it's not because we picked them out. We would have picked them out of a lineup and been like, these are the most amazing people. And they're often people we work with,
Mhm.
that we just had the consistency built in for us. And then as long as the vulnerability and the positivity got put in there, we felt like we liked each other and knew each other. We
Mhm.
became best friends with them. But it's not because we picked them. It's
Mhm.
because these three things happened.
Well, and I put our triangle back up because I want to call attention to the lines that go across the triangle because the triangle remains equilateral. So it's the same amount of positivity, the same amount of vulnerability, and it's the same amount of consistency or commitment. So if one of them is more, like if you get into a relationship where somebody overshares, that makes our triangle lopsided, and that's not functional either. So,
Yeah.
and that may happen, but somehow we've got to figure out how to regain our footing on that. I
Yeah.
see that as a huge problem,
Yeah.
especially in the church. We are so wired and so encouraged, almost required to share immediately, deep, and here's my soapbox. It's like,
Yeah.
is that scary? Yes, because then you're left out there without the consistency, without the positivity, and you are hanging out there for approval.
Yep.
Yipes.
Yep. Yep. I spoke at a mega church a year or two ago, and they ended up rewriting their entire discipleship curriculum, their small group curriculum based on this because they realized they were having, like, trying to force people to be really vulnerable right off the bat. And
Mm-hmm.
then their groups ended up imploding, or people started feeling uncomfortable. And then you've got some, it just creates all kinds of weird dynamics. And it's like, it's a false belief that we can just bare our souls. And it kind of
Mm-hmm.
reflects like church is an interesting world because on the one hand, we're all like trying to impress each other and put on our best and like
Mm-hmm.
kind of have this
Our little
hypocrisy
halos, yeah.
chance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And then on the other hand, it's like we almost try to make up for it with a grand gesture of just like, oh, I'll show you all my worst stuff, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like neither of those extremes are what we're going for here. Like, how do we just learn how to incrementally, in a safe and a good way, share who we are with each other? And so it's a powerful process.
See, I want to read what Karen wrote. For me, it's been important to remember that not everyone is my inner circle. And I've learned that it's okay that not everyone is my best friend. There is beauty in all my friendships, but not all friendships are the same. She's
Yeah,
got to be from
perfect.
girlfriend circles.
No, that's such a great awareness though, because we often think friend or enemy, like we just don't realize there's
Uh-huh.
shades. And that's one of my favorite chapters in my new book is I describe those five levels, those lines that you just showed across the triangle. I describe what happens in each level and what healthy expectations are and what it takes to move somebody to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can actually better assess, like even if you want this person at level 5, it will show you like if this is what's happening, then this is still a level 3 relationship. And I think it's
Right.
so important to realize that we all have about 150 relationships on this triangle. Science shows us with Dunbar's number that's about how many relationships we can kind of maintain. But obviously we can maintain fewer quality ones, deeper ones at the top of the triangle, but we still have value from the looser connections and the
Mm-hmm.
network. And so yeah, each of us just needs to like assess when I feel lonely, which level am I lonely for? What am I missing right now? What do I want and how do I go develop that?
Yeah. I just want to call attention. My sister is here, my twin sister. She says, my
Oh,
sister's my best friend and she's my polar opposite, which is true.
oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to go talk about your book. And I was
Yay.
blessed to be on the team for.
I was blessed to have you on the team.
So I have a picture of it up here, and it's called The Business of Friendship, which just want to mention again, we're going to give away one tomorrow. So keep making comments. Maybe your name will be the one that's selected in our raffle, because I loved it so much. I am not an employee anymore, but man, did I see a lot of the mistakes and mishaps in my professional life while I read the pages of this book. And it was actually healing for me to
Oh,
see.
good.
There were a lot of times when I moved and I left friends behind. And it's like, well, why aren't they still my friends? Why won't they reach out? But now I understand why. Our consistency was rent.
Oh, yeah,
Anyway,
exactly.
so why did you challenge the business world? I guess you
Yeah, a
told us
couple
that for
reasons.
men.
Yeah, it's a great question. A couple reasons. One was when I've been talking about friendship for the last, decade, everybody kept saying consistency is really hard. Like I don't have time. And I
Mhm.
kept hearing that over and over and over. Like I don't have time to be that consistent with people. And it is hard. I realized that we can't if we are coming home lonely from our jobs, we can't make up the social needs we have in our off hours. Like we basically can't build the deep friendships we need in our 2 hours in the evening and our weekends when we're also competing with chores and kids and errands and
Mhm.
binge watching TV and resting and having alone time and all the other things that we have to do. Like friendship can't be put in those little off hours and expect it to get to the top of the triangle and be meaningful and sustaining.
Mhm.
We can throw a dinner party every once in a while, we can have a phone call every once in a while, but we aren't going to feel the level of support and intimacy that we crave if we're trying to do it in our off hours. And so it really became a thing for me where I was like, work is what school was to us as kids.
Mhm.
This is where we are consistent. We would never expect our kids to go to school and not build relationships there. In fact, it's the exact opposite. We understand that they could actually get their work done in 2 or 3 hours if they were homeschooled, but we send them there because we want them to have the recess and the playtime and the connection and the interaction and the human touch. And so I really felt like our workplaces need to be that, have been that, and show that they're best when they are that. And I will say that that would have been enough of a book to write for me, just to say we can't curb this loneliness number with 61% of us before the pandemic saying that we feel lonely on a regular basis. We can't change that without changing how we're spending most of our time, which is in the workplace and in our jobs and in our work. But the other thing that really motivated me to write this book is the incredible research the business world has done that shows when we like our coworkers, when we have friends, we perform better. We are more engaged. We're less likely to leave the job. There's less turnover cost for our employer. We're more creative. We call in sick less. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Gallup, one of the biggest organizations that I have so much respect for, that has been studying this 2 decades, 2 decades. Like, this is kind of mind blowing to me. For 2 decades, they've been saying the best employees are the ones who answer the question, I have a best friend at work. And yet the business world is still like, they take all the other data seriously, like, oh, we need to have this in the workplace, and we need to have this. And yet you still don't see workplaces saying, wow, what are we doing to foster friendship in our workplace? Like, that's serious data right there.
Mm-hmm.
And they've tested it and retested it and tried to change, say, what if it's just have a friend or just have meaningful connections? And that Gallup comes back and says, we would change that question except for one stubborn fact. It continues to bear out in the science that those who say they have a best friend are your best employees. They are 7 times more engaged. And I mean, that number would impress me if it were just twice as engaged, but 7 times more engaged.
Yes.
I'm just like, the workplace should really be caring about this. Like, this should be a really big issue. At the bottom of almost every issue the workplace is saying, whether it's mental health or whether it's diversity and inclusion or high turnover. I mean, you just go down the list, customer service. At the base of all of those is people knowing how to build healthy relationships and feeling supported. So this would, I think, solve a serious amount of HR problems.
Absolutely.
So that's why I wrote the book. To try to make the case.
And what are you most proud of in this book?
Oh, let's see. How would I answer that today? I am most proud of, well, I'm proud of myself for showing up for it, because I felt insecure about it for sure and a little nervous about how it'd be received. I know a lot of people, my other books, nobody thinks, why, you should write a book on friendship. But a lot of people don't think I should write a book on friendship in the workplace. They think it's inappropriate. So I'm proud of myself for just doing it. But I feel really proud of my stance on leadership. I have a chapter in there that I just make a really strong case that I'm not okay with it being lonely at the top. I feel like our leaders are the people that anybody should not be lonely and acting out of loneliness. It's our leaders. So I make a strong case for that. I love my chapter.
That was a strong chapter.
I feel good about that. I know it's a little controversial. I feel really strong and proud of my chapter on toxic relationships, the toxic friends in the workplace, and I feel like I'm offering up something that helps people maybe in a pragmatic way work with that. And it was a really fun book to write, and I loved taking my work from previous books and just kind of going deeper and like looking at the layers and really breaking it down and talking about why do we need vulnerability in the workplace. And just, it was a really fun book to write. Thank you. That was a beautiful question. I am very proud of it.
I am very proud of it for you. It's a great book, baby. So where can they pre-order it?
thebusinessoffriendship.com. And if they pre-order it before Tuesday, launch day's Tuesday, if they pre-order it before Tuesday, there's a whole bunch of bonus stuff that they get. There's a chapter on there of how to stay close to your friends after you leave the job, which is one of my favorite chapters. That's free in there. There's an assessment to evaluate your own relationships at work. There's a bunch of videos and all kinds of stuff in there. So that's thebusinessoffriendship.com.
Okay, I have that link up here, and I will put it in the notes when I get done with this broadcast. And then you have a special invitation for my friends too, don't you?
I do. Just in case you haven't gotten enough of me, I feel like you've heard me, but I am going to be having a 3-hour launch party on Monday, and I'm going to be live streaming from my Facebook page for 3 hours from 4 to 7 Pacific, or that's 7 to 10 Eastern on Monday, the night before my book goes live. And the fun thing about that is I'm going to be bringing in a whole bunch of guests and people who are featured in the book or who are actually leaders practicing the things in the book. I'm going to be having my girlfriends on. Going to have my husband on. He's going to end with a toast for me and a blessing at the end. And so I'm just bringing all the people who have helped inspired and supported and been featured in my book together. And we'll be playing games, and I'll be doing tons of giveaways and sharing lots of stories. And so, turn me on for an hour and and join me, or all 3 hours if you got it in you. But Monday, I'd love to have you join me.
That is going to be a marathon for you.
It is.
I'll put that link in the notes or in the comment section when we get done, and I will continue to broadcast that on my site so that
Thank you.
people can continue to find you. Shasta, this has been eye-opening, profound, wonderful. I actually can't come up with enough superlatives. I admire
Oh,
you so much for your bravery and for your brilliance. And for the people who are here today, um, I just want you to, I want you really to pre order this if you can, because honestly, there's so much wisdom in it. And this is Shasta's book baby. So let's help her welcome it into the world. If we pre order it, it puts her book up higher on the bestseller list. And we want it to place really, really well so that the book buyers and all the powers that be, the dealers, will start buying more of it to put in their bookstores. And if you don't mind, pop an emoji in our comment section, a thumbs up, a heart, whatever you got, because this book is going to make a difference in a lot of people's lives. And I want it to be yours first. So thank you so much, Shasta, for being here. We
oh, Chris, it was my privilege. And you model the triangle so well. You add so much gratitude and positivity and championing and supporting all of us in so many amazing ways. You're reliable, you're consistent on every Friday morning and showing up in so many of our communities. And you
I
share
I
yourself
do
and
it.
you are practicing these three things. And thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you so much for noticing. Thank you. That means a lot. I'm going to wrap it up, Queenagers, and tell you to please have a great weekend with purpose and panache. Practice your 5 Ps, your person, place, pastime, project, and physical activity. And you know what? Go connect with a friend, maybe a work friend that you haven't seen in a long time. Just go connect with a friend. Till next week on Friday. We'll see you then.